Elliot Sideburns placed his glass of pure Glenmorangie on the side table next to the comfortable chair in his darkened office. The office lights were off, and the curtains were drawn tightly against the glare of the Dallas afternoon sun. Elliot was alone in his office, alone with his thoughts of anger, thoughts of sadness, and yes, thoughts of murder. Just a few hours ago, his life was almost perfect. Now he was in shit. He took on a contract to sell his plumbing company to his main competitor for essentially nothing. He thought about signing it, but that would mean that he would have to leave his comfortable chair and go to his desk to get a good signature. Signing something on his knees would make his handwriting seem shaky and sloppy. He put down the contract and picked up a glass of single malt whiskey, raising it to his lips. 45-year-old Elliot was a fan of most spirits. He didn't pour his alcohol into mixed drinks. He drank it mostly straight, sometimes with ice. What he drank often depended on his mood. His mood was gloomy at the moment. The gloomy mood was matched by scotch, preferably single malt, which meant clean. Only a fucking idiot would put ice in a glass of single malt whiskey, he thought briefly. His thoughts wandered. No one would ever accuse Elliot of being a linear thinker. His thinking was flexible, some would say very abstract. This is probably why he turned his young company into a multi-million-dollar firm in just 17 years. Elliot didn't follow MMA very closely. Like most people who didn't live in a cave, he knew who Conor McGregor was, and so did a few others. He had seen a few fights, but it wasn't something he followed very closely. However, he learned two things. MMA fighters can handle pain and have incredible determination. Maybe he should have been more determined. Take more hits, so to speak, and don't give up so easily. He took another sip of scotch, then set his glass down again. He took the contract, growled quietly, then threw it on his desk. Let the game begin, he thought to himself. Becky, he shouted to his administrator, whose desk was outside his office. Find me that scammer, Lester Wilkins. It had been several hours since Elliot's world had come crashing down on him, at least for now. Elliot felt uncomfortable sitting in the chair opposite his arch-rival Dan Baranski, president of Flowtech International. Flowtech was the largest competitor of Elliot's plumbing supplies firm, Seaburns Manufacturing, Inc., in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Seaburns was about 3 times the size of Flowtech, which Baranski founded about a year after Elliot founded his company. Seaburns and Flowtech, among others, always seemed to be locked in an epic battle for government contracts. The Seaburns got the lion's share of the contracts, just as Elliot always seemed to get the lion's share of the wins when the competitors were still in the same high school and college. Elliot was wary of this meeting, especially in his enemy's territory, but Dan, Bohr, to those who knew him well, insisted that Elliot would want to keep this meeting away from prying eyes. This was the first time Bohr had used this technique, so Elliot decided that he needed to find out what was wrong this time. He told Becky where he was going and told her to call the police if he wasn't back by noon. It was just after 9 a.m. when Bohr placed the contract on the table in front of Elliot. "Why would I want your company, Burr?" Elliot asked. "You need to read this more carefully, my friend," Bohr grinned. "I don't want you to buy my company. I'm buying yours." Elliot studied the contract for about 5 minutes. The more he read, the angrier he became. He stopped about the 3rd page and threw the document on the table. He began to rise from his chair when Burr spoke again. "Sit back on your ass and watch this before you act, you smug bastard," Bohr chuckled. He turned the laptop towards Elliot and slid it across the table. The photo on the screen was of Elliot's wife, Tracy, lying across an unmade bed, obviously having just had sex. Elliot's eyes nearly popped out of his head. Burr grinned. "What kind of nonsense in Photoshop are you trying to show?" Elliot shouted. "No Photoshop. Take a good look at the whole photo, idiot," Bohr chuckled. Elliot looked closely at Bohr, then looked closely at the photograph again. Tracy's only items of clothing were the black fishnet stockings and black stilettos he had seen before. Then he noticed the sheets, pillows, and wallpaper behind the bed, all of which he had also seen before. The photo was taken in the bedroom he shared with Tracy. "You bastard!" Elliot shouted. "I will kill you for touching my wife!" Boer raised his hands in surrender as Elliot began to walk around the table. "Hey, chill out, big boy. I did nothing to your precious princess. And, as I was told, everything that was done with her consent, participation, and gratitude. So now, we're talking about a bunch of photos and videos that could be made available to the public. Unless you want to be a smart businessman and make a deal," Boer said, pointing to the contract. "Photos and videos." "Oh, crap," Elliot hissed. Boer pushed the computer to his side of the desk, pressed a few buttons, and turned it back to Elliot. This scene was clearly different from the one in the photo. Tracy walked into the other bedroom fully dressed, immediately followed by a dark-haired man Elliot didn't recognize. The couple engaged in deep kissing before clothes began to fall to the floor. The unknown man appeared to be the same age as Elliot and Tracy. Elliot saw that the man was incredibly handsome, and as his pants and underwear were removed, Elliot saw his wife begin to please her lover. Elliot was shocked at how enthusiastic Tracy was. The two seemed to completely merge into one. Elliot watched his wife's arousal level rise. It didn't take long before she screamed incoherently and experienced her first release. Boer reached for the computer and paused the video. Elliot sat there for a few minutes like a man in a coma, his stomach practically churning. "Can I at least take this home and look at it before signing?" he asked quietly. "Of course, you and your lawyer have 24 hours. That's all," said Burr. "Here, you can save this video. You will receive the rest when you sign the contract." "How many times? How many videos?" asked a stunned Elliot. "Enough to fill a small box. The lover says that your wife is damn good and really appreciates the great manhood that a professional wields. He also says that she is a very loud, expressive slut. They've been doing this 2 to 3 times a week for 2 months now." Elliot had difficulty reconciling the images he saw of the sexually conservative woman he was married to for 22 years, the mother of his 20-year-old son and 17-year-old daughter, and a regular volunteer at their church. "I must admit, I was surprised that it happened so quickly," Boer mocked. "Tracy has always been such a good girl. I figured it would take 3 months or longer, although Lubavnicek said he could do it in 2 or less. This bet cost me another $500 in fees." At these words, Elliot raised his head, a puzzled expression appearing on his face. "You mean you paid some son of a bitch to seduce and fuck my wife?" Elliot spat. "You sick bastard! You couldn't beat me, so you went after my wife? What the hell is wrong with you?" Elliot began to rise from his chair. Boer didn't even move, sitting in his chair and grinning like a cat that had eaten a mouse. "Try it, and everything will come out to the public," he said. Elliot stopped moving and froze for what seemed like an eternity, but in reality, it was only about 10 seconds. He took the contract and video and practically staggered out of the Flowtech office. On the way back to his office, Elliot thought about his troubled history with Boer. As teenagers, they attended the same high school, where Elliot was a star academically and athletically, and Boer was just a loser. Elliot was a high school senior, star quarterback, and rookie on the baseball team. Boer played wide receiver on the football team and was an alternate on the baseball team. In fact, the school's football team made it to the Texas State Finals, but lost when Boer dropped the ball after Elliot's perfect pass into the opponent's end zone in the final seconds of the game. Elliot took the loss hard, but still tried to console Boer after the game. Many other players avoided Boer. Both boys attended the University of Texas at Austin, but did not run into each other often, despite taking the same business courses. In fact, that's where they both met Tracy. Boer asked the well-built blonde out on a date during the first month of their freshman year, but she turned him down. Elliot asked Tracy out a couple of months later, and she accepted. Soon after, the couple became exclusive, dating throughout their college years and getting married a year after graduation. She probably wouldn't have even remembered Boer if he hadn't attended many of the same social events in Dallas that she and Elliot had attended. Elliot told her that Boer was the head of a rival firm and that he would prefer that she stay away from him, which she usually succeeded in doing. That's why Boer decided he needed an assistant to get to Elliot's wife. Greg Silverman was an assistant vice president at a firm with which Flowtech regularly did business. Boer ran into him at a bar, on a golf course in Dallas, and watched Greg charm nearly every woman in the bar. Greg had been divorced twice, but since he was single at the time, Boer knew he had found the right man to seduce Elliot's wife. Boer agreed to pay Greg a handsome fee for what became his part-time job. Greg began his seduction by showing up at the church where the Seaburnses were present and quickly volunteering on one of the committees on which Tracy served. They became friends, and Tracy didn't even think twice about it when Greg Sohn began meeting her for coffee and lunch. As a stay-at-home mom, Tracy considered herself a devoted wife who simply enjoyed the company of a male friend. Madly in love with the one he considered his best friend, Elliot never wondered where Tracy went and came with and where. She never told her husband about coffee and lunches with Greg, and when she started going out to dinner with him, she told her husband that she was with friends. She knew she was being careless with her explanations to her husband, even though she knew she was technically playing within the rules. The couple returned to Greg's apartment after their second dinner date. Tracy knew she shouldn't have gone back to his apartment, but after a few glasses of wine with dinner, she felt good. And for his part, Greg looked great, she thought. 2 hours later, the couple lay in bed, cuddling and giggling after what Tracy considered the best sex she had ever had. Surprisingly, she didn't feel guilty about what the two had just done. Then she knew she would do it again. The two did this again 2 to 3 times a week for the next 2 months. Each time they mated, Tracy felt more connected to Greg. Lester Wilkins called Elliot back 5 minutes later. By this time, Elliot had watched the entire video, which included another session and the sensual outpouring after it. Apparently, Tracy was unaware that her lover was recording the sessions, and was very expressive of her feelings for Greg both during and after sex. If he had any doubts about where his marriage would lead after the first photo and video, he had none after the second. "Hey, Huck, I need you to get the divorce papers ready for me as quickly as possible," he said after the couple exchanged familiar greetings. "Make sure Tracy gets everything she's entitled to, but not a penny more." After a noticeable pause, Wilkins replied, "Seriously, Al, it's not a joke because it's not funny." After an equally long pause, Elliot said on his end, "Seriously, she's been cheating on me for a couple of months now, and I'm pretty sure she even loves this guy. It's a long story, Huck. I'll tell you about it sometime soon." "I'm so sorry, Elliot." "Really?" Wilkins said. Elliot returned home at 5:30 as usual. He could tell from the smells coming from the kitchen that Tracy was preparing dinner. He then heard her talking to their daughter, Judith. Elliot had to give his wife credit. She was as cool as a cucumber, as she apparently had been since she started cheating. She looked beautiful and collected as he walked up to her and kissed her on the lips. He tried to be careful as he sniffed her, trying to determine if she had had sex earlier that day. Now that he knew what to look for, it was easy to tell that she smelled strongly of soap, which probably meant she had taken a shower after sex during the day. Elliot waited until Judith had gone to her room after dinner before telling Tracy that the two of them needed to talk. For the first time since this all started, there was some concern on Tracy's face, he thought. "Do you love him, Tracy?" "How long does this last?" Elliot whispered, barely audibly. Tracy looked around the living room, looking anywhere but directly at her husband. "How long has he known? How much has he known?" she thought in panic. It was only a few times. Maybe a month," Tracy lied. "I'm sorry. It was a mistake. It was just sex. I do not love him. I love only you." Elliot glared at his wife. She told a blatant lie about her affair. The love he felt for his wife at the beginning of the day continued to fade. "We'll talk again when you want to tell me the truth." Elliot glared at his wife before going to sleep in the room their son lived in until he went to college 2 years ago. Elliot didn't sleep a damn thing that night. Not only had his wife been cheating on him for some time, she had been lying to his face in an attempt to find out exactly what her husband knew so she wouldn't have to confess everything to him. Elliot woke up early and went to work early, the first time in his life he'd left the house without kissing Tracy goodbye and saying, "I love you." She definitely noticed this when she woke up and found that her husband had already left for work. Boer expected to see Elliot at 9 a.m. with a signed contract, so he was surprised when his secretary said Elliot was on the phone. "What's the matter, cuckold?" Boer grinned as he answered the call. "I have a box of porn films starring your wife, waiting to be exchanged for the keys to your kingdom. Get your ass over here, big boy." "That won't happen, pussy. Not now, not ever. Do you need my business? You'll have to take it from my cold, dead fingers. Are you trying to blackmail me, idiot? Get busy." "Wait, you're not going to quit Seaburns, are you?" he asked in a trembling voice. "Do you think I'm joking about publishing these video files? You have clients, family, friends, and thousands of other people who will see what a bitch your beautiful wife is." "Well, bastard, it's actually her problem, not mine. She won't be my wife for too long, and I won't have to worry about what everyone thinks of her," Elliot replied. "What about your two precious children? How are you going to explain this to them?" Today, Boer seemed less confident than yesterday. Elliot decided it was because he never thought Elliot was man enough to handle the embarrassment that was sure to arise. For his part, Elliot believed that Tracy would be embarrassed. "What about Seaburn's clients? Surely they won't be happy with this? It won't affect Seaburn's customers if the former owner's future ex-wife is the slut of all time. I imagine managers will laugh about it a little before they move on to ongoing sales," Elliot noted. What do you mean by former owner?" asked Burr. "Did I forget to mention that I sold the business yesterday?" Elliot said in a sing-song voice. "Only got half of what he's worth, but what the hell? Now Joe Gagliardi owes me a huge favor." "Did you sell Seaburns to Joe Gagliardi?" "The same Joe Gagliardi? Papa Joe Gagliardi?" "Yes, yes, and yes," Elliot answered. "We have to run. It's time to start making retirement plans." "Listen, idiot, I wasn't joking. These files will be all over the internet and in people's mailboxes by the end of the day," Boer shouted. "Wow, wow, wow, wow," Elliot said and hung up. "God, that was fun," he said to the group of people who were in his office, listening to his end of the conversation. Less than 4 hours later, Elliot received his first phone call, predictably from Tracy. It looks like someone hacked her Facebook account and posted links to several videos starring her and Greg Silverman. Emails followed, sent to her entire contact list. To say she was furious would be the understatement of the year. "What the fuck do you think you're doing?" she yelled at Elliot. "I closed my Facebook page, but apparently you also sent emails to everyone I knew. You stupid, vindictive moron." "I'll kill you, bastard," she continued in this manner for another 5 minutes. Elliot put the phone on the table and just let her rant. When she finally stopped to catch her breath, Elliot picked up his phone again and calmly told her that he had nothing to do with this. "Actually, this is the first time I've seen most of these videos. The thought of you doing this shit with another man behind my back almost made me sick, you damn slut. But I know who did it. And so does your lover. Why don't you ask him?" he shouted back into the phone. "What does Greg have to do with this, you idiot?" "Why?" The line went dead. Elliot assumed she was calling her lover, so he held the phone in his hand. 90 seconds later, he realized who was calling again. "Hello again, slut," Elliot replied dispassionately. "Don't tell me he's not answering." "Huh. How did you know? Did you do something to him?" She exhaled. Tracy's concerned tone pressed the wrong button for Elliot. In one sentence, she showed more concern for her lover than for him when he brought up her infidelity. "I didn't do anything to your Greg Silverman, Tracy. But since you didn't ask, because I'm sure you don't want to know, you were just an assignment for a highly paid male escort, technically a male slut. He was hired by Dan Baranski to seduce you and film it. All so he could blackmail me into selling him my company at a deep discount. He threatened to publish these videos if I did not agree with his plan. This loser was so sure that I would trade my company for your reputation. He never realized that once you turned into a traitor, you had no reputation to worry about, at least not for me. Anyway, I guess he was so mad that I sold the company to Papa Joe Gagliardi that he posted all your greatest hits. Have you sold Seaburns? Tracy said with a trembling voice. And because you sold your company, Dan Baranski released these videos? You could have stopped it, but you didn't. Elliot heard Tracy start to sob. Why would I stop this? It is very clear to me that you no longer respected or loved me. I loved you with everything I had for 22 years, and this is how you repay my love. They had you again and again. So why should I care who knows you're an unfaithful fallen woman? But the children, my parents, almost everyone we know. Your problem, Elliot interrupted. We'll get divorced in a few months. What if I don't want to get a divorce? She shot back. I've seen a few videos, Tracy. You are completely in love with him, and into his big manhood in his pants. If he hadn't just made you look like the biggest fool this side of the Rockies, you'd have come running to him in a heartbeat. I don't know why, but you left me. I guess my only question for you is, why? Was it something I did or didn't do? There was silence between the sobs. In truth, Tracy realized that she hadn't really thought through her actions before. She admitted to herself that when it came to Greg, she was driven by lust and wasn't thinking with her head. I think he was so cunning that I never realized he was targeting me. He was so friendly, so sweet, so handsome. I probably had feelings for him even before we slept. Then once we've done that, okay, I saw and heard that part. He's got a big, magical manhood in his pants and he knows how to use it. I heard you tell him that you could never be satisfied again, Don't resist divorce, Tracy. I will show you more respect than you showed me. What if you get lucky, and lover loves you not only for your salary? Either way, you'll have more than enough money to live, although perhaps not quite in the style you're used to. Tracy's sobs turned to crying. After listening for about 5 more seconds, Elliot ended the call. Elliot hadn't even started to get back to work when his phone rang again. He guessed that now was the right time to deal with his daughter. Oh shit, Daddy. I just can't believe Mom did this. I think everyone in school has seen at least one of these videos. I'll never be able to show up at school again, his daughter sobbed on the phone. What are we going to do? Well, I'm going to divorce her as soon as possible. You? I think it's completely up to you. The fact that she's an internet porn star might be embarrassing at first, but I guess eventually you'll just have to deal with it because there's nothing else you can do about it. I don't know if she's going to continue doing this, if only because her lover was a paid seducer. I have no idea if they will continue now that he is no longer paid. Wait, you mean he was some kind of male prostitute? Disgusting, she said. Yeah, that shows you what she thinks about me, huh? Elliot said. Can I live with you until I go to college next year, Daddy? Of course you can, baby. Elliot's next phone call was from his son. When is the divorce, Dad? He asked. The papers have already been submitted. Now it's up to the lawyers, baby. Everything I needed to know, Dad. Call me whenever you want to talk. Thank you. We'll talk to you later, Elliot said. Elliot, Tracy, and their lawyers met 2 weeks later. Elliot noticed that his wife looked exhausted. Given some of the phone calls he had made during this time, Elliot could imagine how poorly Tracy took it. The phone call he knew came from her parents was probably the worst. Elliot and Tracy's parents had always been incredibly close, and their phone call to him was filled with many tears and apologies from both parents. We're so sorry, Al. We raised her better than, her father said at one point in the conversation. We thought we raised her better. Obviously, we were wrong. Can I ask you one question, Elliot? Her father said. Is it true that you haven't even thought about trading your company for Tracy's videos and photos? Absolutely, Jack, Elliot said. If you've watched any of these videos, you know that I wouldn't trade my company for anything for a cheating, fallen woman who's in love with another man. I miss you, Elliot, Tracy said at the meeting with the lawyers. Can't we try to save this marriage? What kind of marriage? You ruined it the first time you had sex with this guy. And I can't help it if the man you love was just a setup. And if you still have even a drop of love for me, Then it's at the very bottom of your list. Elliot grinned. Tracy's lawyer was shocked by the amount of assets Elliot listed, especially after the sale of his valuable company. The total amount the couple owned was still significant, but less than half of what Tracy and her lawyer had estimated. When the lawyer asked Elliot about the amount, his lawyer took a copy of Elliot's contract and read aloud, "And other things of value not having monetary value." "What exactly does that mean, Mr. Seaburns?" he said, looking up from his reading glasses. "That means he owes me a favor that has no legitimate monetary value," Elliot replied smugly. "Mr. Wilkins, as a bailiff, you know that you cannot be a participant in fraud, right? If we find out that this is something like a service that has a rating, we will make changes to our application at the appropriate time." Tracy's lawyer droned on. "Mr. Jonas, I happen to know what the reward is, and I can assure you, sir, that it has no monetary value," Elliot's lawyer said. 6 months later, the divorce was final. Neither Elliot nor Tracy went on any dates during this period of time. In truth, Tracy rarely left the house because after the videos and photographs were seen by many of her relatives and friends, she became something of an outcast. Meanwhile, Elliot's family and friends rallied around him. 6 months after his divorce, Dan Baranski slipped in the shower and suffered a traumatic brain injury that left him barely able to function normally. A day later, Greg Silverman was robbed outside a bar in Los Angeles. The robbers took $220 before one of them destroyed Silverman's manhood with a brutal blow to the crotch with a steel-toed boot. The robbers were never found. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.